Hey everyone. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we're diving deep into the world of masterminds and cunning strategists. Ever heard of a little place called r/prorevenge on Reddit? Well, if you love stories where karma strikes back in the most unexpected and brilliant ways, then you're in for a treat. These are real-life tales of people who've served up cold, calculated revenge to those who've crossed them. Buckle up, because you're about to witness some of the most satisfying revenge stories ever. Let's get into it. Cut corners on my dream project? Enjoy watching yours crumble. For the better part of a decade, I've been involved in the real estate development business. I've always taken pride in the details, ensuring that each building I worked on wasn't just bricks and mortar but was a piece of art, a place where people would proudly call home. Every nut, bolt, and tile mattered to me. My latest project was particularly dear to my heart. It was to be a sustainable housing complex, combining luxury with environmental responsibility. After months of careful planning, I roped in a trusted contractor named Darren, who came highly recommended. Darren and I had partnered on smaller projects in the past, and I thought we shared the same ethos and passion. Given the scale and importance of this project, I also roped in an old school friend, Mark, as an investor. Mark had made a small fortune in tech and was eager to diversify his portfolio. He was a smart guy, but his experience in real estate was next to none. Trusting Darren's reputation and our past rapport, I left him in charge of several key components of the project. That was my first mistake. With the influx of Mark's cash and the promise of a game-changing development, the stakes were higher than ever. Little did I know that greed and shortcuts would soon cast a dark shadow over my dream. As construction progressed, things seemed to be running smoothly. I had weekly meetings with Darren to discuss the project's status, and everything appeared on track. About 6 months in, I decided to bring in an independent quality assurance expert to do a routine check. With a project this monumental and my reputation on the line, it was just a precautionary measure, or so I thought. When the inspector's report landed on my desk, I was horrified. He'd found that instead of the high-grade materials we'd agreed upon, and, more importantly, had been billed for, cheaper, substandard materials were being used in key structural areas. My heart sank further when I saw pictures of crucial beams and supports that were improperly installed, making the structure vulnerable. I immediately called an emergency meeting with Darren. His response? A cocktail of excuses and blaming his subcontractors. These things sometimes slip through the cracks in big projects, he said nonchalantly. I was seething. My dream project was turning into a potential death trap, and it seemed like Darren was more concerned about his profit margins than the safety of future residents. Deciding to keep calm, I took a two-pronged approach. Firstly, I hired a legal team to dive deep into our contracts and Darren's finances. Secondly, I brought Mark up to speed. He was livid. While he wasn't savvy in real estate, he was a tech genius, and he proposed a plan. We'd set up discrete cameras throughout the construction site to monitor everything. If Darren was indeed cutting corners, we'd catch him red-handed. For weeks, Mark and I watched from our makeshift control center. The footage was damning. Not only was Darren using low-grade materials, but he was also allowing unsafe construction practices. We even caught him selling off the high-quality materials we'd purchased and pocketing the profits. However, the icing on the cake came when we captured a conversation between Darren and a city official. From their hushed tones and secretive demeanor, it was clear something shady was going on. Listening in, we were stunned. Darren was bribing the official to fast-track our permits and overlook the subpar construction. Now, Mark and I had all the ammunition we needed. With the video evidence, legal reviews, and a dossier of Darren's financial discrepancies, we were ready to strike. Before we could, though, Darren, perhaps sensing that the walls were closing in, approached us with a deal. He offered to refund a portion of our money if we overlooked the discrepancies and didn't sue. It was a clear sign of his guilt, and instead of accepting the deal, we used his proposal as the final piece in our revenge puzzle. Word about Darren's unethical practices spread like wildfire in the construction community. With our watertight evidence, we reported his actions to the city's Construction Regulatory Board. The fallout was swift and unforgiving. Darren's contractor license was suspended indefinitely, essentially blackballing him from any significant projects in the city. Our legal team, armed with the mountain of evidence, took Darren to court. The video footage of his shady dealings and the conversation with the city official was played in front of a stunned courtroom. In the end, he was not only ordered to refund the entirety of the money we'd paid him but also faced hefty fines for endangering lives and breaking city regulations. The city official didn't escape the hammer of justice either. Once exposed, he was immediately relieved of his duties, and an investigation into his past dealings began. Several projects he had approved were now under scrutiny, opening up a can of worms the city wasn't prepared for. But for Mark and me, the real satisfaction came not from Darren's fall from grace, but from ensuring the building we'd dreamed of would stand tall and safe. We employed a new contractor, known for integrity and excellence. It set us back a few months and cost a bit more, but we viewed it as a worthy investment in our vision and the safety of those who would eventually call our building home. As the structure neared completion, word spread about our dedication to quality and safety, leading to a waiting list of potential buyers and renters before we even launched our marketing campaign. The property became a beacon of resilience and integrity in the heart of the city. Perhaps the sweetest part of our revenge was the day we held the grand opening. Mark and I stood proudly as the city's mayor cut the ribbon, with news reporters capturing every moment. Our story of triumph over deceit became a talking point, and as for Darren? The last we heard, he was doing minor repair jobs in another state under a pseudonym, his once flourishing business reduced to rubble. Though it had been a tumultuous journey, Mark and I came out of it stronger, our bond deepened, and our vision realized. We turned a potential disaster into a legacy of quality and trustworthiness, a testament to what can be achieved when you refuse to be taken for a ride. You've gotta love a payback story. Let's get into the next one. Landlady tried to evict me unjustly, so I bought the building. When I graduated college, I was desperate to find an apartment that I could afford on my entry-level salary. After weeks of searching, I stumbled across an older building with a few rental units in a not-so-popular part of the city. It wasn't the most modern or trendy, but it was within my budget, and the location was decent for my work commute. Eager to secure a place, I didn't do enough research and swiftly signed a year-long lease. The landlady, Mrs. Thompson, seemed kind enough initially, a sharp-witted older woman who proudly stated she'd owned the building for over 3 decades. For the first few months, things went smoothly, but soon after, the problems began to emerge. The heating system was unpredictable, the water pressure was almost non-existent at times, and I started spotting mold in the bathroom. I approached Mrs. Thompson with these issues, hoping for an understanding response. Instead, I was met with hostility. "This isn't a luxury apartment, young man," she snapped. "You get what you pay for." I attempted to remind her of the legal responsibilities of a landlord, only to be brushed off and told that if I didn't like it, I could leave. Conversations with other tenants revealed that they too had similar grievances but chose to endure it because of the affordable rent. To add insult to injury, Mrs. Thompson started inventing reasons to drop by unannounced, often making snide comments about the state of the apartment or insinuating that I was violating the terms of the lease. It became apparent that she was trying to find an excuse to evict me, likely to hike up the rent for the next tenant. I wasn't about to be bullied out of my own home, so I decided to delve deeper into the situation. Little did Mrs. Thompson know, I'd been saving and investing wisely since my college days and had built up a decent nest egg. An idea began to form. Armed with my newfound determination to turn the tables on Mrs. Thompson, I started documenting every interaction we had and every issue with the apartment. Photos of the mold, videos of the poor water pressure, and logs of her unannounced visits filled a dedicated folder on my computer. Additionally, I began researching tenant rights in our state, and my findings were enlightening, to say the least. One evening, after a particularly unpleasant interaction with Mrs. Thompson, where she had attempted to enter my apartment without notice, only to find the chain lock engaged, I'd had enough. Her outraged face as she peered through the gap, demanding entry and citing some non-existent maintenance issue, was the last straw. The next morning, I visited the city's housing department with my meticulously organized evidence. The kind clerk, upon seeing the extent of the issues and the violation of tenant rights, suggested that I also speak with a lawyer. By that afternoon, I had secured a consultation with a local attorney specializing in tenant-landlord disputes. She was intrigued by my case, especially given the extensive evidence I had amassed. "Mrs. Thompson has been a landlord for over 30 years, you said?" The lawyer mused. "It's about time someone taught her a lesson." With the law on my side, we began building our case. One of the most significant findings was that Mrs. Thompson had been neglecting some critical building codes. The mold problem wasn't just my apartment, it was systemic throughout the building, a result of outdated plumbing and poor ventilation, issues she had ignored for years. These health hazards put her in serious violation of state regulations. But I didn't stop there. Remembering my conversations with other tenants, I approached them, offering to help them understand their rights and share the evidence I'd compiled. To my delight, several were on board, equally fed up with Mrs. Thompson's antics. Together, we formed a small coalition, and with our combined strength, we decided to take collective action. One bright morning, Mrs. Thompson was served with a class action lawsuit from her tenants, citing the numerous health hazards, her negligence as a landlord, and her numerous violations of our tenant rights. The look on her face when she opened her front door to find a server handing her the papers was priceless. The once proud and intimidating landlady suddenly looked small and defeated, a realization slowly dawning on her that her years of bullying and negligence were catching up to her in a big way. The lawsuit garnered local media attention, and reporters swarmed the building, keen to cover the story of the aging building and its disgruntled tenants. Seeing the dilapidated state of the structure and hearing our testimonies, the narrative was clear. Mrs. Thompson had been exploiting vulnerable renters for years, banking on their silence and desperation to turn a profit. I won't lie, the following weeks were stressful. Mrs. Thompson tried to retaliate, serving eviction notices and increasing the frequency of her surprise visits. However, the media's presence and our resolute stand ensured that her tactics were exposed to the public, making it harder for her to maneuver. It was a tense standoff, but I could sense the tide was turning in our favor. The culmination of our efforts led to a courtroom showdown that felt straight out of a movie. Mrs. Thompson had retained a high-powered lawyer, hinting at the magnitude of the pressure she felt. On our side, the tenants, under the guidance of our attorney, presented a united front. And as the court sessions progressed, it became increasingly clear that the weight of evidence against Mrs. Thompson was overwhelming. The court ruled in our favor, not just on the basis of the evident neglect, but also on the flagrant violation of tenant rights. The judgment mandated Mrs. Thompson to make extensive repairs to the building to bring it up to code. In addition, she was slapped with hefty fines for her long-standing neglect, and the court ordered her to pay a significant sum in damages to the tenants, including reimbursement for medical bills some of us had accumulated due to the mold-related health issues. But the financial penalties were just the tip of the iceberg. Given the media attention, her reputation as a landlord was in tatters. Many of her properties, as we later found out, were under similar scrutiny, with past tenants coming forward to share their stories. The once feared landlord now found herself on the receiving end of public disdain and legal battles. The network of tenants she had wronged over the years was vast, and they were now emboldened by our victory. On a personal note, I moved out a few months after the court ruling. The repairs on the building had started, but I had already found a better place, free from the specter of Mrs. Thompson's tyranny. Many of my fellow tenants did the same, finding better housing options or purchasing homes of their own with the compensation they received. It was a sweet twist of fate to see so many who had suffered under her rule now using the very money they received from her to improve their lives. Mrs. Thompson eventually sold the building, presumably to cut her losses. The new owners were a breath of fresh air. Not only did they ensure all the necessary repairs were completed, but they also went above and beyond in modernizing the building, adding value for the remaining tenants. Throughout this journey, the bond between the tenants grew stronger. We had been through a shared ordeal, and our collective action had achieved what seemed impossible. Many of us remained in touch, and yearly reunions were organized to celebrate our victory and the friendships that had blossomed from it. But perhaps the most gratifying part of this whole saga was the ripple effect it created in our community. Empowered by our success, other tenant groups began to stand up to negligent landlords, ensuring their rights were respected and fostering a culture where landlords and tenants interacted with mutual respect. Workshops on tenant rights became common, and our city saw a surge in the establishment of tenant associations. In the end, what began as a personal quest for justice against a tyrannical landlord turned into a larger movement for tenant rights and fair housing. Mrs. Thompson's fall from grace was a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that greed and negligence can have profound consequences. And for the rest of us, it was a testament to the power of unity and the belief that right will always triumph over might. That wraps up today's video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you ring the bell icon so you never miss an update from us. Drop your thoughts and comments down below, we'd love to hear from you. Enjoy your day.